Good afternoon to you. I am Mark Sudduth here in Wilmington, North Carolina. It is Monday, the 13th day of February 2023. And today I'm going to talk to you, as we start things off, a very topical topic, and it's in the news a lot, and that is we're going to start off with high-altitude balloons. And this definitely is in my wheelhouse because we do high-altitude balloon work with trying to send those up into hurricanes. We test them on the Great Plains, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of, I think it's fair to say, hysteria around this right now, and this is something that I can address just a little bit without dipping my toe too much into the world of politics, which is way outside of my wheelhouse. And then we're going to talk about lower 48 weather, and by the way, not necessarily in these orders here, or this order, but we will get to lower 48 weather. And I saw an interesting tweet from our friend Eric Webb today about the potential for a busy or big severe weather season. And then, of course, we will talk about the tropics just a little bit. There is some tropical cyclone activity in and around the Indian Ocean, a system affecting New Zealand again. So we'll look at that as well. All right, good to have you with me. Let's get started. First of all, along this topic here, this is really important. I know that there's been a lot going on ever since the Chinese spy balloon incident off the coast of near where I live. Myrtle Beach is only, as the crow flies, maybe 60 miles from here, if that. And ever since then, balloons have been kind of a big deal. Anything from the funny and humorous memes to very serious implications of what could be going on between U.S.-China relations, and then everything in between and on both ends of the spectrum. So I just want to kind of ground things a little bit here and just, get people to understand there's a lot more going on with balloons than just spying, okay? First of all, in case you didn't know, twice a day, balloons are sent up from the National Weather Service as part of the upper air sampling program that the United States and Canada and other parts of the world has. And these are helpful for upper air observations, and they don't happen everywhere. There only are select locations around the country, and this is what the different pieces of equipment that are sent up look like. And it says right on them, harmless weather equipment. There are YouTube videos, some of them kind of humorous when it's very, very windy. You want these things to go vertical. Sometimes they go more horizontal, and then they eventually get to vertical. But they're not very large weather balloons, and sometimes they use hydrogen. A lot of times they are helium. And this is a map of all the different locations that they get sent up from. And that is a lot of locations. And sometimes the payloads come back down. Well, they all come back down. And people find them. They find these little radio sondes or raw wind sondes. They little styrofoam things. And it says, hey, return it to the Weather Service. And people do. Or they post a picture of it on their social media or whatever. So that's a very common thing. And without those weather balloons, we wouldn't have the sampling of the upper atmosphere that we do have. Okay, not everything can be done through radar or other sounding processes, upper air observations from aircraft. The balloons are very, very important for that. And as you can see, they get launched anywhere from the Pacific Northwest all the way throughout the west coast of the United States, the interior parts of the west, the Midwest, and the east. And then during hurricanes and even other severe weather events, additional balloon launches will be tasked, and that adds more data, because the more data we have, the better, generally speaking, the numerical models will do. All right, so that's an idea of where they are in the United States. They get launched from Alaska. There's been a lot of talk and reports about all kinds of UAPs, these unidentified aerial whatever, something, I don't even know what UAP means, but wasn't it called UFO? I'm sure you're screaming at the screen as to what UAP stands for. But look, this is all, mostly balloons are just nothing. They're part of research from weather to upper air atmospheric research from different countries, especially Antarctica. I know that's a continent, to space weather. All right. And Dr. Tony Phillips over here at spaceweather.com, a very popular site, they do upper air balloon research and all kinds of different things. They sell these pendants and other little bobbleheads or whatever to help fund it. High altitude ballooning is a thing. It's a hobby. I don't remember if it was a Super Bowl commercial, also timely to talk about, or what, but I remember several years ago there was a commercial from one of the credit card companies about rewards, and it was like these two guys, I think, used some of their rewards points or money or whatever it was, the cash back or something, from their credit card to launch a weather balloon with like a phone in it or something, which actually is illegal. You're not supposed to do that. But high altitude ballooning has been in the mainstream via commercials for credit card cash back rewards. People do it as part of the one that Dr. Phillips runs here is called Earth to Sky Calculus. They measure protons coming into the upper atmosphere and all kinds of different things, and they fund it through crowdfunding by selling some different things to people. It's like common, okay? And they do this out in California. I don't think they've ever lost one, where they couldn't actually retrieve it, and so forth and so on. And then you've got even websites dedicated to the whole thing, the hobby of high altitude science. All right, and these are some different pictures going by. I have had interactions with some of the folks that run this website. A lot of the equipment that we have bought for our project comes from this company, and they have some YouTube videos as well and all kinds of explainers and tutorials over here. Intro to weather balloons, all right? Inflating to tying it off, balloon performance, tracking the balloon, so forth and so on. And one of the big things to remember here before I get into what we do with it, you almost always, in the high altitude ballooning community, have to file what's called a NOTAM, the Notice to Airmen. Sometimes it's a Notice to All Airmen or whatever, but a NOTAM or a NOTAM. It just depends on how you say it. You call a special number. The number that we call typically is, I think, with Lockheed Martin. You tell them different parameters about when you're going to launch, how big the payload is, the airspace it's supposed to travel through, and how long it's going to be up there. It's all in Zulu time. It's very formulated, and there's a protocol, right? And you almost always have to do that. Among other things, you can't be launching 35 pounds of something into the atmosphere and not have more permitting and whatever to go along with that. What we launch is very small, and we still file a NOTAM just because why not? Why not let everybody know who can look at that kind of thing that we are launching a balloon? And we also use amateur radio, APRS, to transmit information from the weather balloon that we launch. Other amateur radio operators that launch balloons or help with balloon clubs do the same thing. So it's a very common thing. Here's just a little bit of video from when we were doing it back in 2020. This is out in Texas. I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit. Look how big the balloon is. I'm going to turn the volume off. I'm going to try to fast forward on the video some, if I can get it to do so. We use helium. There's a balloon. Look at the balloon from the drone, and it has a couple cameras on it. And there's me. This is from one of our documentaries. That's what it looked like back in 2012. You can see it's got a little payload on there. I'll put a link to this particular video, this documentary that we did about it when we were testing in 2020 in today's update. But we get video. It's all recorded on GoPros. It reaches the upper atmosphere. There's me talking about it. And the balloon will finally reach what we call burst altitude. And in our case, it's usually above 100,000 feet. And remember, the Chinese spy balloon was at about 60 to 65,000 feet. That's above commercial aircraft, yes. But we go even higher, 15, close to 18 miles in some situations. The balloon reaches that burst altitude where the air pressure is so low that the balloon finally bursts, right? It can't handle it anymore. It bursts, and then the payload falls back to Earth. And there it is, 103,366. There's the balloon itself. It's latex. The latex generally dissolves in the upper atmosphere or falls back to Earth. And before we get a lot of comments about pollution, look, the Weather Service, research communities, you name it, they're all sending these latex balloons up there. It's nothing compared to the plastic pollution that mankind is doing. So check out our video. It's called Wide Open Spaces, and it's all about what we were doing back in 2020. Part of that was testing our balloon. So what do we want to do with it? Just to remind you, we want to launch ours into the eye of a hurricane. We've done it one time, but that was at night during Hurricane Nate in 2017. We have never been able to do it during the day. It's very difficult. But we continue to test. We do. We test. We didn't test last year. We just figured after the testing we did in 2021 that we were ready. We did like 5, I think, in 21. We will be resuming testing this year in May. And believe me, we are going to definitely let the world know through social media, through Lockheed Martin calling in the NOTAM, that we are out there, probably in the Great Plains again. By the way, we test in the plains because it's easy to recover the payload. It's nice and flat, grid system of roads, not as many trees, and not as many densely populated areas. And one more thing about this topic before I move on. Yes, sometimes we can even see our own balloon way up in the stratosphere. In 2019, we tested from Pratt, Kansas. We were out about 30 miles west of there, maybe less than that. It was near sunset, and we were looking up, and there it was. It was just amazing. You can see that little white dot up there. You can't see the payload. The payload is the size of a lunchbox, what we're using, if that. It only weighs, I think, 3 pounds, if that. And anyway, so that's just a little bit about what normal high-altitude ballooning, the hobby, the science behind it, you name it, is all about. Some of these balloons that have been shot down recently were probably unregistered, like they probably didn't file a NOTAM. I don't know, but maybe they didn't. And so nobody knew that they were up there. I would think that anybody that was tracking these could look and see, was there a NOTAM filed for this particular parcel of airspace? And if not, well, I guess then you're subject to the full power and might of the United States Air Force, and you get what's coming to you. We will be filing our NOTAMs, believe me, and we'll see. Hopefully this will all kind of die down by May when we resume our testing in advance of next year's hurricane season. By the way, when we do it in May, we intend to do it in and around dry line events, supercells. I think that would be really neat to look down on supercell thunderstorms from the stratosphere using high-definition cameras. We get the meteorological data from the equipment that's on board of our payloads as well. So we'll see. Stay tuned for all of that. All right, so there's my little opening monologue, if you will, about the current sort of hysteria around the high-altitude balloon phenomenon. All right, so let's move on now to something else. And as we continue along our schedule here of topics, the Southern Oscillation Index. Believe me, I wasn't intending on having 5 or 6 tabs dedicated to balloons, but here we are. So one of the things we do in the off season, we keep up with what's going on with the state of the ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation. We are coming up on halfway through February, and of course March is next. And once you hit March 1st, we're only about 90 days away from hurricane season, and people start paying a little bit more attention. The different models that come out, climate models, ocean models, you name it, different forecasting agencies, starting with Dr. Klotzbach at Colorado State University, eventually NOAA, the big different companies that are out there, individuals, and even teenagers with Facebook pages that love weather. They will put out their forecasts. Nothing wrong with that as long as you keep it real, and when you mess up, you acknowledge that my forecast didn't go so well. It's okay, it's all science as a practice, just like medical stuff is. It's never perfect. Well, sometimes it is. Math is usually perfect, but that's another story. Anyhow, the SOI, Southern Oscillation Index, a great and literal barometer on how things are going in the state of the ENSO, the pressure patterns, and when it's strongly positive, like I talk about, we're in La Nina, and it's still strongly positive. And you can even see lately the 30-day has been turning more, I guess we say north, that's just an expression. It's going up again, the index is going up. And that's important because until this goes negative and stays negative consistently, we're not going to develop any type of westerly winds across this area. I talked about getting this map up. Our good friend of the project, Tim Melman, made this map for me, and I really appreciate it. What am I trying to? Let's use a color that'll pop. I guess green. So normally when the SOI is very positive, the winds blow strong from east to west across the ENSO regions here. And then when the air pressure changes and it's lower in the East Pacific than it is in the Western Pacific, you get these westerly winds that come across, and there's always a warm pool that sits over here, and that helps to get pushed eastward. The warm water in the subsurface comes to the surface. That gets spread out like butter across toast. It's all complicated, but somewhat easy to kind of visualize. It's all about the pressures. And this is the main area that we watch in regards to hurricane season, this Nino 3.4 region. It's almost like a Venn diagram. This is your 1-2 area, this is your 3 area, your 4 area, and then the hatched area is your 3.4. That tends to have the most impact when this is warmer than average or colder than average on what happens over here. Generally speaking, the Gulf does not seem to be impacted by what's going on out here at all, just so you know. So those are your ENSO regions. Well, what does it look like today? Well, remember I showed you this. Still have these strongly positive numbers on the SOI, and yes, we still have the La Nina right out there in the 3.4 area. And I mean, it's almost perfect. That's roughly the 3.4 area right there. And yes, the water temperatures are still somewhat below average. Now, we have warmed the water temperatures across the Nino 1-2 areas and into the Nino 3, but that's the eastern Pacific. It's got to have a lot more reach, the ENSO, the warm ENSO, or El Nino, and we're not even there yet. So we got a ways to go. It's only February, and yes, there's still plenty of time to warm things up. And I think that's why the modeling looks like it does here. And this is pretty remarkable. Look at literally the scatter shots, like you took a sawed-off shotgun and just said, boom, and all of that buckshot or whatever comes out of there, you can tell I don't hunt, scatters. Okay, we don't have a focused consensus yet. The ensemble mean is almost literally, as it should be, I guess, right? That's what a mean typically is, down the middle. You have an equal distribution of blues, as you do the reds, etc. It's just right now a time of confusion because we're still in a La Nina pressure pattern and atmospheric state with some really warm water waiting to come up, and like we're not sure, and the models aren't sure either. They don't know. We're getting closer to what's called the spring predictability barrier, where there's just really like tossing a coin as to what could happen with the state of the ENSO. But I like to look at this once a week. I look at it every day, to be honest with you. And look, there's just the same, like I said, there's the equal amount of blues, which are your latest members right there. That means they are the most recent, as there are on the south side, if you will, or the less than average to above average, right? There's equal amounts, it seems. So, yeah, kind of right down the middle. All right, on to severe weather season. Again, we will be doing some weather balloon work in the nation's midsection. I got up this morning, I saw this tweet from, and look, right there, 7:07 a.m. I saw it this morning, I thought, I definitely have to talk about this. Really caught my eyes. The last 21 days of the CFS V2 runs for May and June, and this is a climate model, and if you know your models and you know what you're looking at here, that is a telltale sign, and we'll get into the weeds of this more in a minute, of an active period when this is valid May of 2023, anomalous or above average precip, right up the heart of the traditional tornado alley, and as I'm going to show you in a minute, it may be overdone. Kind of stealing Eric's words. I'll show you his words, so we're on par with everything. That's what he was talking about, but I'll show it to you. Yes, potentially a very busy severe weather season coming up for May, and of course it goes into June as well. He mentioned June. Typically the severe weather season lifts more to the north, and we're going to be out there a lot through our crowdfunding support, as well as my arrangement with Fox Weather. I can't wait. We're going to do a lot of innovative things out there, sort of changing the perspective of storm chasing, adding a new dimension to it, and augmenting what people have already done over the years. We're really looking forward to that, including, as I've mentioned a few times already, the use of high-altitude balloons with photography to capture what happens with some of these supercells. It could be pretty interesting, and it looks like it could be pretty busy. Now, Eric did mention, as I was sort of teasing there, that there's a chance that this could be overdone to some extent. I want to get rid of me there, if I can. Goodbye, Mark. And so he says, although the CFS V2 may be overdoing it, the big snowpack out west, we know that's there, and the warm Gulf, well, there it is. This is one of the other methods. No, it's methods, Mark. This is just a different, this is the NOAA Coral Reef, so it's the same one as this, I would assume. Anyhow, the Gulf is warm. I mentioned this a lot. And then he talks about that snowpack that is very prevalent out west, just crazy amounts of snow. And that, he says, if I just let you read on here, the warm Gulf are favorable early indicators for more dry line setups and severe weather in the western high plains this spring compared to the last few years. And for all of you storm chasers out there, from the professional side of things all the way down to just getting started recently, it's been kind of a strange year, a few years here, and more than just everything else. But with the lack of significant tornadoes and supercell activity in the traditional Tornado Alley area, not that anybody is like hoping for those things, but it's been noticeably absent. And this data here that that Eric was tweeting about suggests, and it's always just, you never know till it happens, but these patterns here that the CFS V2 are seeing certainly does raise an eyebrow or two. I'm sure it'll be talked about a lot in the severe weather community. All right, what about today? What's happening out there with lower 48 weather? We will end with that. Active out west, more snowpack. Yep, more snow will be falling out west, so that'll help to bolster things as we get ready towards, next couple months here, 60 days from now. It'll be, starting in early April to mid-April, right? Severe weather season will be upon us, so we're not far away. So yes, more winter storm watches, warnings, even down here in Arizona. Pretty good storm setting up for this week. I'll show you that on the GFS in just a moment. Kind of gnarly conditions, I guess you could say, in the offshore waters. Gale warnings here as another storm, yet another one leaving instead of coming up the coast. Too warm behind it anyway for much snow. By the way, we are almost out of time to have a big nor'easter with a big snow along the I-95 corridor. This would be like we're in mid to late September and there has been no hurricane activity to speak of anywhere near the east coast of the United States or in the vicinity of the western Atlantic. That would be the kind of an analogy here. But there's still time on the clock. Just like last year we were thinking that kind of thing might happen. And then we had Fiona, of course. And then we had, of course, Ian. Fiona was a close call for the eastern United States. Of course, it went up into Nova Scotia after just devastating Puerto Rico. So yes, there's still time, just like we saw with the hurricane season with Fiona and Ian last year. But the pattern just doesn't look very conducive for one of those storm tracks that rides up the east coast, off and near the benchmark over here, just dumping snow and coastal impacts. Again, that's a good thing for people that just don't want to have to deal with it, but it is important to acknowledge that it's not happening. All right? We can either love the weather, hate the weather, neutral about the weather. Doesn't matter. The weather still happens whether or not we are here. And so kind of understanding it and noticing when things are changing or are different. Yes, this is pretty different. A pretty dry season, so to speak, in terms of the big nor'easters for the eastern United States. And you can see that on the GFS as the 12Z run from today. Notice first out here in the west, our storm will take shape. Lots of blues and greens, which is frozen and liquid precip accordingly. On Dr. Cowan's wonderful maps here, look at all that snow in the Rockies. That is such good news to see for the Colorado River Basin and other areas out there. It really is good to see. I cannot emphasize that enough. One of the positives that you can talk about when you have inclement weather is, yes, there are benefits to it. Now look, real quick, you can kind of see the symptom, or a reason anyway. Look at these isobars here. This is around that big fat ridge that's just sitting out over the Atlantic there. And just like we talk about with hurricanes, that big bubble of air, or balloon of air, talking about balloons, is kind of deflecting. It's like, and it's not letting these storms ride up the coast. So they're bumping into that ridge and going around it. And so the storm track has been up and around that area of high pressure, and the troughs try to dig in behind it, and they do an okay job, but we're not getting these deep longitudinal troughs like this, or even back to the west a little bit, with those storm tracks riding right up the east coast. It's just not there. Now, I don't know the why behind what we're seeing. That's a whole other thing. Probably some PhD papers can get written about it. But the noticeable absence of the deep trough in the U.S., the blocking to allow these storms to track off the east coast, it's just not there. But that southeast ridge and the western Atlantic ridge certainly is. And if that's still there as we get into hurricane season, despite what happens with ENSO, it could make things interesting, just something to think about. All right, as we move on out into time, look, it just resets the pattern, by the way. The trough swings through, And then look, you get all, I talked about this last week. It's like Groundhog Day all over again. 1032 millibar high offshore of where? The east coast of the U.S., and it's just the same old song and dance, and any storms that come in after that, guess what? They go up and over. Well, they try to come across, but just no big Arctic air outbreaks. And of course, we are very close to and into the first part of March if you take this all the way out to 2 weeks. But anyway, the next week or so features the one storm across the west. As I said, more mountain snow in areas that really need it, can use it and bank it. Bank that snow, bank that moisture. It's a good thing. Some severe weather in some of the areas of the deep south. Be sure to visit the SPC site at spc.noaa.gov if you're interested in that. And just keep an eye on things. That's what I'm here for, to kind of show you what I look at, bring you into my world, and show you and talk about it with each other, or at least me talking to you here, and we can comment on it on YouTube, in our Discord, on our Patreon site, etc. And just keep you engaged, all right? Because we got enough distractions going on out there. Let's not let the weather sneak up on you, all right? By the way, that background shot, that was taken from one of our tests recently in the last couple of years. That's what it looks like from about 90,000 feet. I think that was above Texas, if I'm not mistaken, in late May of 2020. So there you go. All right, you guys have a good rest of your Monday and a good rest of the week ahead. As always, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget how to talk. That's a note to me. Don't forget, please do subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the notification button. Supposedly you get notified. Hopefully you do. Hopefully just check anyway, because I do enjoy putting these together for you, and I hope you learned something. All right, that is it from me. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack. I'll talk to you again in about a week.